is the meaning of something, a visible impression gets bounced back from another surface, and in thought one considers something, contemplates it before acting upon it. Okay, so Rahula says the mirror is used for the purpose of reflection, and so the Buddha then says, in the same way, Rahula, an action with the body should be done after repeated reflection. An action of speech should be done after repeated reflection. An action in mind should be done after repeated reflection. Okay, then the Buddha is going to extend this kind of reflection. In this first paragraph, he just applies it to the present, when one is about to act, by body, speech, or thought, one reflects on that action before acting. Now the Buddha is going to extend that process of reflection to the 3 periods of time. So in paragraph 9 he says, when you wish to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. And now he's going to show exactly how one reflects on it. Would this action that I want to do with the body lead to my own affliction, my own harm, to the harm of others, or to the harm of both of us? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, painful results? Okay, when you reflect, if you know that the action is going to be harmful to yourself, to others, to both, that it's an unwholesome bodily action that will bring painful results, then you definitely should not do that action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know that the action won't have any harmful effects on oneself or others, then you can do that action with the body. Okay, so that is the way that one reflects before engaging in the action. But now, in paragraph 10, the Buddha explains how one reflects as one is engaging in the action. So while you are doing an action with the body, this is if a little boy back in Brooklyn, 52nd Street in Brooklyn, as he was pulling out the $5 from his mother's pocketbook. Okay, while you are doing an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Okay, one reflects upon it in the same way. And then, if you realize that it's going to be harmful to oneself or others, then you should suspend such a bodily action. Then one stops in the process. As one is doing it, one stops and sort of short-circuits the action before completing it. But when you reflect, if you know that this action won't bring any harm to oneself or to others, then you can continue such a bodily action. Okay, now paragraph 11 is the way to reflect upon an action that has been completed. So after you have done an action with the body, then you reflect upon that action thus. Did the action that I did with the body lead to my own affliction, to the harm of others, to the harm of both? Was it an unwholesome action with painful consequences, painful results? Okay, if you see that that action did lead to one's harm or to the harm of others, then, here the Buddha is speaking in a monastic context, he says, then you should confess such a bodily action reveal it, and lay it open, or expose it to the teacher, or to your wise companions in the holy life. So this is a process that the Buddha laid down for monks and nuns who have committed unwholesome actions, that go get actions against the precepts, in order to be clear to them one confesses them to another monk, to another nun. Okay, having confessed it and so forth, then you should undertake restraint for the future. So you confess the action in order to clear oneself of the transgression, and then one makes a determination to restrain oneself in the future. Okay, but after committing that action, when you reflect back on it, if you see that it wasn't harmful in any way, then you can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. Okay, the next paragraph repeats the same thing regarding actions of speech. So the next few paragraphs just repeat the same thing for actions of speech. Then 15 repeats the same thing for actions of mind, except that there is a difference. I think I pointed it out in the note. I should have had it in the text. In note 639. The difference is that in the case of mind, since it's a purely mental action, not something which is done bodily or verbally, one doesn't confess it to for the monk or nun, one doesn't confess it to another monk or nun. But rather, one should feel repelled, humiliated, maybe that's not a good word, repelled, ashamed, and disgusted by that mental action. And having done that, then one sets up restraint over the mind in the future. So in an action, when it's a purely thought or emotion that one is feeling, if you had to confess every unwholesome thought or emotion, it could be that you go on confessing over and over and it just becomes an annoyance for oneself or others. But instead one sets up a sense of shame or a sense of repugnance towards the unwholesome thought, and then exercises restraint over one's thoughts in the future. Okay, then paragraph 18 is a kind of summation or declaration about this process of reflection, the broadening or extension of it. The Buddha says, whatever recluses and Brahmins in the past purified their bodily action, verbal action, and mental action, all did so by repeatedly reflecting in this way. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will purify their bodily action, verbal action, mental action. They will all do so by reflecting thus. And whatever recluses and Brahmins at present are purifying their bodily, verbal, mental action, they are all doing so by repeatedly reflecting thus. And therefore you should train thus. We will purify our bodily action, verbal action, and mental action by repeatedly reflecting upon them. And one, or at least a few practical ways to go about this process of reflection, to apply it in your daily life. And that is, in the course of the day, if you do anything that you consider to be wrong or unwholesome by body or by speech, especially by body or speech, then at the end of the day you review your behavior and just make a mental note of that unwise bodily action, unwise verbal action, and make a determination to refrain from it in the future. If it's something really heavy that weighs on your mind, then you can, if you have like a fellow Dhamma practitioner, then you can speak about it with them in order to get the weight of it off your mind. But if it's just matters that are a bit, that others would consider trifling, but that are upsetting you or disturbing you, what you can do, if you do like an evening devotional service, or just go before a Buddha statue in your home shrine, and you could do a confession of this before the Buddha, saying, Bhante, I have committed this. Not this Bhante, but Bhante Buddha. But Lord Buddha, I have committed such and such unwholesome actions. Please, of course we don't have the Buddha forgiving like a God, but please accept my repentance for this, and I determine that I'll refrain in the future.
12 Hail Marys.
Excuse me?
12 Hail Marys.
Yeah.
You don't get to do it.
Say it again.
12 Hail Marys.
12, I see 12 Hail Marys. Please.
So it seems.
Yeah, take the microphone.
It seems like in this latter layer of reflection, we had that conundrum of the Nazi case. It's being kind of answered in this way of reflecting.
Oh, that's a good point, John.
It doesn't have. You are not really lying. You are looking at the consequences.
That's a very, very good way to put it. Yeah, because in this process of reflection, you're really examining what are the consequences of an action that I'm going to take when I'm caught in this dilemma. Any questions now? Okay. All right. You take the microphone.
Bhante, is it true that in the whole Nikayas, the absence of unwholesomeness is the wholesomeness itself? Because you say, if I don't do something bodily bad to others, to myself or to both, then I could abide in happiness and the wholesome states. So it's a passive wholesomeness.
I don't think so. It's just that in the Indian way of expressing things, there's a kind of fondness for using the negation of things that are considered bad or unwholesome in order to suggest what could also be positively good. Like the three roots of the wholesome are alobha, adosa, amoha, which is literally translated non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. But those also imply positive qualities, like non-greed can imply generosity, or giving to others. Non-hatred will imply patience, loving-kindness, compassion. Non-delusion implies wisdom, insight, understanding.
In real practice, there is a gap for a person who is engaged in saving lives, for example, for whales, or a person who stays at home whales, like the big whales in the ocean. Somebody has to take actions to save them.
Oh, I see.
Engage.
Yeah.
It's kind of action put into action.
Yeah. Well, I would say, that there are many other suttas or teachings of the Buddha which speak about different types of positive, wholesome action.
What are they?
Excuse me?
What are those suttas?
Well, there's ones that speak about giving. Well, morality is explained often as abstaining from this, abstaining from that. But developing, like loving kind, the four Brahmaviharas, the four divine abodes, and practicing patience.
And those just mental contemplation?
Well, I think they'll also be expressed in action. Okay, I have an internet question or two. Actually, it looks like the second one is almost...
It's just already answered. I think you just already answered.
This is a continuation of this.
Yeah, but
It seems that it's almost the same
you already
one.
answered.
Would it be correct to say that wholesome in Buddhism is defined as anything that is not unwholesome, and the unwholesome is anything that has greed, ill will, and delusion as the intention? So wholesome must be free from greed, ill will, and ignorance. I mean, that much is true, but it doesn't mean that, that just sort of sitting in a state of passive quiescence is itself, the fulfillment of the wholesome. And the first question here, what about the issues with moral absolutism versus moral relativism? Where does Buddhism stand versus Catholic and Muslims? I think the question is a little bit beyond my scope, ability to answer. Okay, I think we'll have to stop now and break for the lunch period. Then we'll come back for the lunch. And after our discussion, I'm going to need some people to help to put away all of the tables and to reset the meditation cushions here, because there's going to be a meditation retreat starting tonight. Okay, so we'll end with the sharing of the merits. Sharing the merits is something wholesome, no? In fact, there are 10 bases of meritorious action that are spoken about: giving, moral observance, cultivation, development, meditation, service or helpfulness to others, showing respect and reverence to others, listening to the Dhamma, teaching the Dhamma, sharing merits with others, rejoicing in the merits of others, and straightening out one's views or understanding. So those are 10 positive actions. Okay, so let us share the merits with the Devas, the Bhutas or fair spirits, the Nagas, the dragon spirits, and with all beings. Akasata Chumata Deva Nagamedika Punyanta Nanumodipa Chiram Rakantu Sasana Akasata Chumata Deva Nagamedika Punyanta Nanumodipa Chiram Rakantu Desana Akasata Chumata Deva Nagamedika Punyanta Nanumodipa Chiram Rakantu Manparam Etavatacha Hehi Sampadam Punya Sampadam. Do it the short way. Sabbe Devanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Sabbe Bhutanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Sabbe Satanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Bhavagupadaya Vichitato Etantare Satakayupapanna Rupya Rupicha Sanya Sanino Tukha Pavuchantu Pusantu Nibutin. Okay, then we stand and do 3 bows to the Buddha. Before we do that, I should mention that I brought some of the catalogs that I keep on getting, even though I wrote to them in LL Bean. I said, please stop sending me the catalog. And they said, yes, we'll take you off the list, but I still get their winter catalog. So if anybody wants their catalog, I'll put them here. And also there's a magazine that's called Inquiring Mind. they have me write a column for each issue, and then they sent me some excess copies, so I'll put them in here also. So anybody who wants can pick them up. Okay, so we end with 3 bows.
Bow to Bande.
You want?
Hold. 现在手还是
So we don't have a discussion today?
Yeah,
I
we
said,
have discussion.
didn't I say that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
come back after lunch? Yeah.
Come back after lunch. This discussion today.
And then after the discussion, then we have to bring all of the tables.
We'll bring the table after the
chairs,
discussion.
and bring them in the back, and then set up the meditation cushions.
Come back for discussion after lunch.
忘记了他的确是要 save。
我知道。你 save 的名字是一般是怎么意思？你是 MN
你可以先写，没关系。
哦
好像，
可以的，
B
是不是？MN 061 MN 061 MN 061 and save 可以了。这个怎么关？我忘记了。
这边按下去。这个
哦，我猜的是。